If you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk. And if you give him the milk, he'll probably ask for a straw, and when he's finished, he'll ask for a napkin. And then he'll want to look in the mirror to make sure he doesn't have a milk mustache. And when he looks in the mirror, he may notice he needs a trim. So he'll probably ask for a pair of scissors. And then he'll need a broom to sweep up, and he'll probably get carried away and sweep up the whole house. And when he's done, he'll be so tired, he'll want to take a nap, and so you'll have to make a bed for him with a blanket and a pillow. And when he crawls into bed, he's going to expect you to read him a story. And when he sees the pictures in the story, he's going to want to make his own pictures, and he'll ask for paper and crayons, and then he'll want to hang his picture on your refrigerator, and so he'll need Scotch tape. And then just looking at the refrigerator will remind him that he's thirsty, and so he'll ask for a glass of milk, and he's going to want a cookie to go with that. You just can't be too careful about who you let in your house. You never know what trouble or inconvenience or disruption might ensue when you give a mouse a cookie, and that goes for all kinds of strangers. Just imagine if that visitor in question is a 6-foot-tall, gaunt, unwashed, long-bearded, half-starved, wide-eyed, exhausted fugitive from the law. Elijah came to the widow's door only asking for one small cookie, but she had to wonder where it would end. Everybody knows you keep prophets at a distance. That's why prophets are always having to yell, like street preachers. Nobody wants to get close enough to catch whatever it is they got. And you certainly don't want to take one home with you. Prophets like Elijah were not so much fortune tellers as they were whistleblowers about the here and now. Their reputation for forecasting comes from the fact that our present behavior always has future consequences, inevitabilities that anyone could plainly see unless their vision has been compromised. And that's essentially the prophet's message. You aren't seeing things as they truly are. And nobody likes to hear that, especially when there are so many happy alternatives to listen to. The people who want to profit from influencing our behavior are always sprucing up the sales pitch, and bending the truth, and shrinking the fine print, and trying to bring along as many other people as possible to give us the sense that it's okay. Yes, you can have a double meat cheeseburger every day of the week without heart failure. How do you know? Well, look at the sales figures. Everyone's doing it. Yes, you can have politics without principle, education without character formation, relationships without commitments, marriage without fidelity, sex without intimacy, status without responsibility, wealth without work, worship without sacrifice, God without reverence. It's how everybody lives. Doesn't that justify it? Well, the prophet knocks on the door and says, no, it doesn't, and no, you can't. And the next thing you know, the house is a mess and everything is upside down. The prophet comes to remind us that we were chosen to be the alternative community, and we've forgotten that. Moses said, you are God's chosen people. What are you doing working for Pharaoh? That's not who you are. Daniel said, we worship God alone. Why are you bowing to statues? That's not who you are. Elijah said, the God of Abraham sends the rains. Why are you praying to Baal? That's not who you are. You are God's. All truth is God's truth. All life is God's life. If you refuse the things that give you life, there are consequences, and those consequences are death. What a killjoy. What a party pooper. Prophets are like a skunk at an outdoor wedding. Of course, if you want to be more charitable to them, you could also think of them as people bearing the burden of God's perspective. People bearing the burden of God's perspective and charged with the thankless task of delivering God's perspective to people in denial. Prophets are people who look around at how we live and feel God's heart breaking as if it were their own. And they cannot bear it. And so they become people of such passionate conviction that they can't turn it off even when they want to, even on the gallows. As Jerry Wiley reminded us this morning in Ecclesiastes 1:18, which Eugene Peterson has paraphrased this way: the more you know, the more you hurt. The 60-year-old political cartoonist Ali Verzat has always played it safe in his native country of Syria. Political cartoonist, but he always knew to play it safe until, that is, the regime became so brutal. He felt he had no choice but to turn his cartoons on Bashir Assad himself. Then masked men showed up. They beat him up, and they made sure to break both of his hands. They broke the cartoonist's hands. That should do it, right? Verzat let his hands heal and went right back to work. Now the whole world is reading his cartoons drawn by brokenness. That's how it goes with prophets. This week we said farewell to Will Campbell. And if you want to know what prophets were up to during the 20th century, just read the obituary in the New York Times. But what was Elijah so upset about? Well, remember that the Hebrew people were constantly being subjected to invasions and dislocations. They were seeing foreign cultures and intermarriage with foreigners and worship of foreign gods threaten to dilute their identity, to dilute the Hebrew identity completely out of existence. They had not yet internalized the notion that in all this turmoil they were to be counter-influential, a light to these nations. They were still in survival mode, still tribal in their thinking, still trying to protect their identity at all costs. So when their own king, Ahab, chose not only to rule from Samaria, the land of intermarriage, but to actually marry a foreigner, Sidonian princess Jezebel, and to do what the book of 1 Kings called more evil than any king before him, angering God more than all the other kings of Israel put together, the people were apoplectic. Ahab was so ruthless that when he made the mayor of Jericho refortify his city, he also made him sacrifice his own firstborn at the laying of the foundation, and to sacrifice his youngest son at the raising of the gates. And to whom was that horrific sacrifice made? To Jezebel's god, the one called Baal. Baal was supposedly the god that sent the rains. And in a society where wealth was tied up in land and agriculture, and the poor subsisted on what was left after the rich had their fill, the rains determined who lived and who died. Elijah knew that Baal was a fiction, but a powerfully effective fiction for wielding power over gullible, hungry, and fearful people. So Elijah protested. And not by writing an angry letter to the editor, but by attacking the king and queen themselves at the very source of their power. He pulled the plug on Baal. He did that by asking God to shut off the rain, to let everybody know who does that, which meant that everybody suffered. Everybody. It was hardball, but that's how Elijah rolled. And for some reason, God went along with the plan, presumably because God had hired Elijah to do this job and decided to give him enough rope to do it. So everybody had to go hungry long enough that even the people at the top finally began to feel it. and to feel threatened by it. And that made Elijah, well, let's just say, unpopular with everybody. A pariah and a fugitive. None of the hotel chains would take his credit card anymore. So God sent him camping in the boondocks. And then to keep him ahead of the law, He moved him into the home of a widow in Zarephath. When you see widow in the Bible, know that it's a loaded term, meaning that of all the people who were poor, this one was the poorest. Before Social Security, Medicare, federal assistance, back when women couldn't be breadwinners or inherit their husband's money, back when to be unmarried was to be destitute, and having been married made you unmarriable, untouchable. Back then, there was nobody in worse shape than a widow, and with a child eating up whatever she could beg, borrow, or steal, she didn't even have anything to hope for. By the time Elijah showed up, she had resigned herself to the idea that she and her son would die of starvation, a situation, ironically, exacerbated by the very famine caused by the very stranger now mooching off her kindness. To further complicate things, this widow was not a Hebrew, but a Sidonian, one of Jezebel's people, Elijah's nemesis, the one he's running from. So you see, when he asks the widow for her last cookie, he's not only asking her to starve her child and herself, but to betray her king, her God, and her people. But she did as Elijah said. We aren't told why. Maybe because she had nothing left to lose. Maybe because she recognized their growing interdependence. But we know that when she did, she experienced the same miracle we see throughout the Bible: plenty in the face of scarcity. The food once shared did not run out. Manna on the ground, water from the rock, loaves and fishes by the lake. When someone dared to step out of the scarcity mentality and share, the scarcity mentality, which is a lie, and step into God's abundance, which is the truth, they find that they have all they need. Even when the widow's son runs out of, the Bible says, breath, of life itself, the stranger in the spare room has the breath of life, and the boy is resuscitated. What is interesting about all this is that the widow sums up her experience of both miracles with one word: truth. In verse 24, she says to Elijah, "The truth is in you." That is to say, not Baal, not Jezebel. When Elijah said there would be plenty for the hungry and justice for the poor and life for the dead, it all came, shall we say, true. And her loyalties changed. This is a major step for her in this condition. It's a major step for any of us. Our ability to trust is so compromised that the truth always arrives as some kind of threat, like a gust of wind threatening our house of cards. The hardest thing we have to do with truth is to simply let it in. Let it in our house. Join in our conversation, sleep in our beds, and eat at our table. It's just so hard to hear the prophet say that the lives that we have been fed and the denials we've tried to subsist upon are the true famine and the true death. But it's true. Without a doubt, the most tragic circumstances I have encountered in human relations have been not merely when one person sins against another, not merely when the crime is committed, but when someone withholds the truth from another person with the excuse that it's for their own protection. Parents, of course, parents have to ration it with small children. But if that continues past the time they have a driver's license, something else may be going on, and the seeds of resentment may already be planted. We owe one another the truth. What arrogance to think that people need us to protect them from the truth, as if there's something better than truth, and that we alone possess it. Of course, what we really mean is, I'm afraid of other people's reaction to the truth. Notice the language we use. We say, she'd die if she found out. Or, I'd die if she found out. Really? You'd die. The truth will kill us? That is demonic logic. And it is a lie. If we were honest, what we would say is, I'm protecting myself. Living by my fears only puts my interests first. And protecting other people from the truth is a way of saying that God can't be trusted with the people we love. God is powerless to provide a new life or to raise up a new life rooted in the truth. Is that what we really believe? Is that what you want to believe? That's an important question, not only for how we manage our relationships, but how we express our identity as church. You've heard me say that people under 30 are moving away from churches of all kinds in droves. Now listen to the top 6 reasons they're giving for leaving the church and see if you hear a common denominator. Number 1, they say churches seem overprotective. Number 2, that their ministry to teens and 20-somethings is shallow. Number 3, churches seem antagonistic to science. Number 4, their treatment of sexuality is too simplistic and too judgmental. Number 5, they make exclusive claims to the truth. And 6, they are unfriendly to those who doubt. These young people think that the church is asking them to deny what they already know to be the truth. And friends, that's not who we are. That's not the kind of church this is. But because other viewpoints have had the media's undivided attention for so long, these young people don't even know where to look for us. And that has to change. And it will change when we have the courage to say at home and at work and at the board meeting and at the swim team meet that all truth is God's truth and we're not afraid of it. We embrace education. We thank God for science. We're not ashamed of sexuality. We don't claim to have all the answers, and we welcome those who doubt. Whatever has to die for the truth to live has no future anyway. And we serve a God who can bring life out of any death. If the Sidonian woman was here today, I think she would tell us about her son. More than just a child that she loved, he was her social security, her path back to life in community. He was her future. And I think she would tell us that letting the truth come live with you is worth whatever you have to risk to welcome it. And that the courage to take that step comes from the faith that there really is, on the other side of truth-telling, a new life. We might remember that Jesus once raised a widow's boy in Nain in much the same way, which would remind us that Jesus himself was a son who was raised, wasn't he? And that he was the prophet who said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." But for that to happen, the prophet has to come home and live with us. I love the story that Barbara Brown Taylor tells on herself. She of so many accomplishments and accolades, says that a few years ago she was talking with a friend over coffee about all the invitations she had and all the projects she'd agreed to, all the opportunities and deadlines and demands. She would never be able to do it all, she complained. She was overextended and overwhelmed. Her friend leaned in and said, "You know I love you, right?" I've been hearing this same speech from you for about 10 years now, and I'm starting to think that it's a lifestyle choice you're making for yourself. I'm guessing some of you are thinking right now, boy, I'd hate to hear that. But I think most of you are probably thinking, I'd give anything for one friend like that. Paul reminds us to always speak the truth in love, but it's never easy to hear it. But honestly, what kind of prophet are you expecting? One bearing balloons and presents with pretty paper, telling you what you think you need to hear? Here's how to identify the prophetic messenger of God in your life. She or he will be the one who sits you down and leans close and breaks the ice like this. You know I love you, right?